What is a university's core mission? Is it a place where ideas, even controversial ones, are tested and debated to advance knowledge? What happens when the controversy is freedom of inquiry itself? And what safeguards keep debate open? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is the Doha Debates podcast.
And so I don't know of any issue in which faculty is terrified to speak to the extent that they have been since October 7th.
The most important thing that happened in university is not happening in the classroom. It happens in the corridors. It happens in the library.
Students are sitting there with their cell phones, and they can at any moment take a video of you, and it'll be on the evening news, and you will be destroyed.
Yelling at a speaker is not permitted by, any normal version of academic freedom, so that the speaker can't speak.
Our debate today: have universities begun to favor ideology over truth? I'm joined today by our guests. I'd like to welcome for this discussion Mohammad Fadel, professor of law at the University of Toronto; Pablo Avelluto, the former Minister of Culture for Argentina; Omer Bartov, the Dean's Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University; and Dorian Abbot, Professor of Geophysics at the University of Chicago. Welcome to you all. It's really good to have you all. Thank you for being here. Now, we are having this conversation in Argentina. As you know, it's a nation with a proud tradition of student activism, where the idea of academic freedom is deeply ingrained. So it is a great place to raise today's debate question as it impacts students all over the world. Have universities begun to favor ideology over truth? Dorian, you're making eye contact with me. Let's start with you. Let's just dive right in.
The most straightforward measure of ideology in an American context would be political party membership. And so we can look at that to get a sense of whether there's ideological conformity. In the public at large, there are roughly the same number of Republicans, which would be the right-leaning party, and Democrats, which would be the left-leaning party. According to a study by Langbert 2018 and Langbert and Stevens 2021, in the academy overall, among the faculty, there are 8.5 registered Democrats for every registered Republican, and this varies very widely among fields. So, for example, in two fields, which were anthropology and communications, they weren't able to find a single Republican in the entire survey, which was almost 9,000 faculty. In most fields in the humanities, the ratios were about 40-1 Democrats per Republican, which means that you would have to go to 4 to 5 universities in order to find a single Republican in many of these areas on the faculty. In the sciences, the ratio tended to be 5 to 6-1. And in engineering, it was 3-2, and there was no fields where Republicans outnumbered Democrats. So I think this is to say that the data do indicate that, at least in America, there is ideological conformity among the faculty. I'll let other people comment now, but then the secondary question would be whether this has any influence on the core mission of truth-seeking.
Okay, so you brought your stats. Let's go to you, Pablo, because you mentioned you were talking about this in an American context. So, in Argentina?
I think everywhere there's no universities without ideology. You cannot think of universities with no ideology, with no ideologies. But that don't mean, in my point of view, to silence truth. A university that silences truth shouldn't exist. Because what happened to Dorian, I know many years ago, was canceling voices is not to win arguments, It's quite the opposite. In Argentina, we have a sad tradition of canceling arguments. We had dictatorships that brought teachers to exile and also to death, and that and we have a guaranteed academic freedom, but I should be ingenious if I don't acknowledge the things that Dorian has said. That there is a disbalance, but I don't think that is that you're going to solve that paradox bringing out ideologies, because that's another ideology in a way.
You're scribbling notes, Professor. What are you scribbling? What are you thinking?
First of all, I agree with the idea that having neutrality at the university, being neutral, trying not to have ideology at the university would be largely, to use a common term, fake. You can't have neutrality, because if you have a university in which there are many people who are thinking and working and involved in social and intellectual issues, they will have opinions. And they should have opinions. We don't want people who don't have opinions, people who are just, Teflon. So that's the first thing. The second thing about ideology at the university, so obviously, as I said, you will have ideology at the university, or ideologies, and sometimes some will predominate and sometimes others. That's different from having universities that are under ideological rule. And we have many such cases in the past where people at the university will find that they have to conform to a particular ideology, and if they don't, they might lose their jobs or worse. And so it is not at all the case that necessarily universities would be more to the right or more to the left. They reflect certain trends in society. And the final thing I just want to say, specifically about American universities, one thing that maybe needs to be looked at is not only the extent to which there are more Democrats than Republicans, but where are faculty coming from? Where are you recruiting faculty from? Why is it the case? Is it because the faculty or the universities choose people with a particular opinion because there's more of them, so they want people who think like them? Or is it also because of an educational system that produces a certain result? And maybe it's the educational system that has to be looked at for producing people who are more inclined to have this kind of opinion than another.
Several gems there. I want to kick it over to you, Professor.
Well, I think a university is a place, an institution that's unique in our society because it's dedicated to pursuing truth and allowing the faculty to be the exclusive judges of the merit of the research that's involved. Ideology is a political criteria for judging the output of scholars. So if we want to ask, has politics intruded into the governance of universities in the United States and Canada, the answer is obviously yes. And that's been a result not because of the faculty is one-sided in favoring a particular party over another, but because politicians and donors are insisting on interfering in the output of scholars. That's seen most clearly in the attacks on critical race studies, on gender studies, and Middle Eastern studies, where there's been this imposition of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which wasn't even intended for this function, but has now been appropriated to censor scholarly output. But what's not at issue for the folks who are sort of supporting this is they're not challenging the meritorious nature of the scholarship itself, right? They want to shut down the scholarship because of the political consequences of it rather than the truth of the scholarship. So that's a clear instance, the clearest instance, I think, of ideology interfering in the work of scholars in North America.
Well, then, before we get too much deeper, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. What is the purpose of a university?
I think we're in agreement
Yeah.
That the university, the purpose of it is to pursue truth and to give scholars the freedom to pursue truth and to only be held accountable to other scholars based on scholarly criteria, not political criteria. I think all of us are in agreement with that, on that proposition.
I would just add, yes, of course, the pursuit of truth, of course, is subjective because we can argue about the truth of one thing or another. To my mind, the university as an institution has to challenge what we believe is truth, has to challenge conventions. It's a place that allows people, it should allow people to say things, think things, and teach ideas and concepts that may seem outrageous, unacceptable. That's what the university should be about.
For reasons that I don't fully understand, our commitment as a public in North America to higher education has declined dramatically since I was an undergraduate student. And as a result, universities, both public and private, have become increasingly dependent on donors. And these donors have politics that are not necessarily consistent with the mission of the university.
Yeah, in Argentina, things are a little different because the main universities are public funded. So the problem is not the politics of the donors, as you said, it's the politics of the government. So when the government is, as is happening now, extreme right-wing government, libertarian government, the problem with universities is there are lots of demonstrations because universities need to have their budgets to keep on an economy run by high rates of inflation. But there's also an ideological problem with public university, public access to higher education, and the idea we are listening every day that there's a lot of ideology and mostly leftist ideologies in universities, and maybe the statistical, from a statistical point of view, things are the same in humanistic, more progressive teachers, more progressive students than conservative ones, but I think that the challenge is how to think on that, how to solve that.
This issue of who pays, who's paying is actually really important. And there are some institutions that refuse to take any federal money, either loans, student loans, or direct grants for research. And that does allow them to be a bit more independent. And the other point is about neutrality. So I 100% agree that every student, every faculty should be advancing their perspective on every issue. But I think it's important for the institution to stay neutral, because if the president starts speaking ex officio and saying this is the institution's view on this, it restricts the ability of people being paid or depending to get a degree on the university from expressing their opinion.
Of course, I agree that the university should not take positions on political issues, except when the university itself is under attack. When the university itself is under attack, the university has every right and duty to defend the integrity of the institution.
No matter who it's under attack from?
Donors don't have a de jure right to tell universities what to do. What they are exercising is extra legal authority that our political economy affords them.
Can I make one point about that, about the dynamics of how donors can influence things? So typically, like, a university will announce, we got a $150 million donation from, Mr. X. But what they actually got is a commitment to $150 million over 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is then Mr. X comes in and says, I don't like what you guys are doing. I'm pulling back the money unless you do what I want. So that's usually how the pressure is exerted in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Omer, you wanted to get in?
Yeah, I want to pick up on a number of points. I also want to start with a sort of personal story. I went as an undergraduate to Tel Aviv University. And I think the tuition was maybe $1,000 for the whole year. Wow. And I got a very good education there. And I'm talking about the 1970s. My wife is from Hong Kong, and she went to university there and got a very good education. I mean, I ended up at Oxford, and she ended up at Princeton from our undergraduate institutions, and she paid nothing for that. And she still says, our daughter went to Brown, and I don't think that my daughter got a better education than either my wife or I. But we at the time paid several tens of thousands of dollars, and since then, and my daughter is 30, the tuition has doubled. So that's something that, as you were saying, that is so important, that we have now a system that costs so much money, that is so much geared to elites, even as the country has become richer. And why is that happening? We're seeing universities, and I can say that about my university and others, where the emphasis is beginning to shift. And it's all in the name of not enough money for this. That is destroying the university as at least people like me understand it and what it is supposed to be. It's not meant to train people to do things that are immediately applicable. It's meant to do exactly the opposite. That's the origin of the university.
You have all faced pressure for your positions or for things you have said. So, Mohammad, I know you want to get in here, but several people now have raised the case, I shall say, of what happened to you, Dorian. So I feel like we should just tell us that story.
Well, the first thing that happened to me was I tried to say in my department that we were having I felt we were having trouble talking about difficult issues related to DEI programs. And then
for our international audience.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sorry about that. There were some aspects of the DEI programs that I was uncomfortable with, in particular, limiting what people could say or think, and in certain cases, making it very hard to hire people of certain or admit people of certain ethnic backgrounds. So I tried to raise those issues, and then the response was that a bunch of graduate students in my department tried to make it so I couldn't teach any classes and stuff like this, and have it host and mentor any graduate students. They wrote a letter asking this. I was also supposed to go get a sort of a retraining in how to think about things and stuff like that. So the University of Chicago said, no, we're not doing that. The President Zimmer at the time, he's since died, was the president. He didn't mention me in particular, but just issued a statement saying our faculty can say what they think, and that was the end of that. But then kind of in the aftermath of this, I had been invited to give a lecture at MIT, and like a special lecture for my field, a public-facing lecture, and then sort of once my views were out there, they sort of rescinded the invitation. And then I ended up speaking at Princeton. So it's not like this isn't. A lot of people have had much worse experiences with this stuff, but that was my experience.
So much of this conversation, Pablo, is focused on the elite schools in the U.S., in North America. Do you see parallels to this in Argentina and other parts of the world?
Well, biggest university in Argentina is the University of Buenos Aires. It has it doesn't have exams. You must approve a course that it takes a year after secondary school, and once you approve, then you start the career or the orientation you want. That brings a lot of discussion, of course, because it's quite democratic, but it's too expensive too. The first year is the one that takes the most the biggest amount of money, the biggest number of professors. So it hadn't brought equally, because it went more for the middle classes, but not for the poor. That they don't want, they don't imagine to go to university. The university title has lost some of its value too. There's common said in Argentina that an architect is driving a cab or something like that, things like that, And so postgraduate studies are now the elite in a way.
Some parts very unique to the United States. You've also had experience outside of the U.S. and those elite institutions. Do you see parallels?
Look, I mean, I taught at the State University in New Jersey, at Rutgers University. That was a very different experience from after I moved to Brown. So first of all, I saw both systems, and I have to say that what struck me at Rutgers at the time, which is a great school, was how ill-prepared the undergraduates were. That people came to study with me, and I teach history, and people read and write. It was very hard for many of the students to read and write. The elite was sort of creamed off and sent to Princeton, and I had some brilliant undergraduates, and I had some undergraduates who really needed a few more years in high school, but in a good high school, which obviously they hadn't attended. And when I came to Brown, I could see the difference. I went to Oxford in 1980, and that was right after Maggie Thatcher started a revolution in the university system in Britain, which was very late compared to other European countries. It opened up the university. And we have to remember, we speak about the university as a sort of modern phenomenon, but the universities around the world opened up after World War II, from a few tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of students. And at Oxford, it happened late. What did that mean? Well, many people will tell you to this day in Britain that it dumbed down education, that people suddenly were at Oxford who, again, couldn't really read and write very well, that they didn't know their own literature, that they didn't know their own history, because they hadn't gone to these elite schools. My undergraduate education was in Israel, and I have to say that, and obviously I'm so personally engaged in that because I grew up in that country and because I'm watching what is happening in that country right now. The change that has happened in Israeli universities, to my mind, is extraordinary. And in part, it's because of an opening up. So there are far more universities in Israel now than there were when I went to university there. In part, it's a reflection of the change of society. But to see how the university became a place where faculty are afraid of the students, are afraid of speaking. It's not truth to power. It's truth to their own students, because students are sitting there with their cell phones and they can at any moment take a video of you and it'll be on the evening news and you will be destroyed.
The university, as Mohammed said, are coming from, or you said, are coming from centuries ago. But the students are coming just for the present, just for the present with their cell phones, the IA access, and that is really challenging everything. As
that's
we
true.
know.
That's true. And just to say, that's something that we haven't spoken about. But the change, even in the last 2-3 years, not just the cell phone, but with AI. And which is sort of outside of politics, but of course nothing is outside of politics. We don't even know where it's going, but I know that like 30% of the papers that I got from a class of 100 students last year were identified as generated by AI. And that was a class about genocide.
Oh my gosh.
At Brown.
At Brown.
Okay, Professor, I'm going to pause you there because you opened up this box of so many things that we could get into, and I know everyone wants to
Pandora's
jump in.
box.
A Pandora's box. There were several things in it. One of the things that piqued my interest was when you talked about how the student body has the ability to pull out their cell phones and record the professor and make that professor's life change immediately. Dorian, you have some experience. We touched on earlier that experience. I wonder what you make of what that means for the climate of both protest, of free speech, of openness to debate ideas.
It's definitely an issue now. People getting set up and then a video being taken and cut and presented out of context. I mean, you mentioned AI. You could also AI fake videos. Yes. So someone didn't even say the thing. It's one thing if they say it and you cut it up, but it's another thing if they didn't even say it and you just invented it. It's about 5 years ago, we had a class at the University of Chicago called The Problem with Whiteness. And one student in the class posted it on Twitter and said, I have a problem with this class or whatever. And then that professor got a lot of email hate as a result of this. And so then the university had to say, well, what do we do about this? It turned out in that situation that what the student had done was considered legitimate extramural speech. All he did was post the course syllabus and say, I don't think this is an okay class to have. And they just offered the class 6 months later, and no one disciplined anyone in that specific case. But that's the sort of thing that it happens a lot now. With academic freedom for extramural speech outside the classroom, there's generally accepted total freedom of speech.
Total freedom. Okay,
within
so
the
then
First Amendment in the U.S.
We must talk about Gaza, and we must talk about Israel here. We have seen both faculty and students who have been targeted for speaking out in support of Palestine. That doesn't necessarily always have to be about what they're teaching in the classroom. It can be about whether they have joined a sit-in or whether they have protested, what they posted on social media. International students have been arrested and detained for their views, and despite continued support for Gaza, there are still voices who want to silence those people on these college campuses. Who should get to decide and who shouldn't?
The donors, no.
That's who gets to decide. Yeah.
Right. Mohammed.
I'm sorry. I think, what Dorian mentioned is very important. Freedom of speech is not academic freedom, and academic freedom is not freedom of speech. In various points, they overlap, right? But they are not the same. So academic freedom is the right to engage in research and to teach publicly, right? But it is accountable. It's accountable to your scientific peers, right? Freedom of speech is something that's asserted generally in the United States against the government. So I might, for example, have freedom of speech to use all sorts of racial slurs as a matter of American law, but I don't have the right to use racial slurs in the classroom against my students, because that violates my responsibility as a teacher, and I can be properly disciplined for that. And no one can say, what about your freedom of speech? No, because you have violated your role as a professor.
What we see now, I think, is a crisis in that sense, which right now has to do also with the case of Gaza, but as you say, it's a larger issue. That is that faculty have to assert the fact that they are actually the university. That the university is not the president and the provost. Those come and go. It's not even the students. They come and go. It's the faculty. What makes a university is its faculty. If the faculty go, then you won't have any administrators. You won't have any students. You'll have just empty buildings. And faculty have forgotten that that's actually their role, to govern their university. And it's gone over to donors, to corporations, and also now to the government.
Yes, because all this atmosphere, the worst result it could have is that the faculty will censor itself.
Yes.
Just in order to I don't want trouble with my students. I don't want trouble with my donors. I don't want troubles. So, and that's the way. And that has happened many times in history.
I wonder if you have felt that pressure to censor yourself, because earlier you were talking in slight hypotheticals there that this could happen, but it happened to you. You walked into a lecture that you were planning to give. This was in Israel, and you were met with protests.
Yes, I did come to give a lecture, but it was a guest lecture. I'm not a member of the faculty of Ben Gurion University. I was hosted by someone who is. And yes, my lecture was disrupted. It was impossible to hold a lecture. It ended up actually being a very interesting event for me, because the students who were protesting had received a WhatsApp message the day before saying that I had said that there was genocide in Gaza. I actually hadn't said it yet at that point. The first thing that happened was that the students who were protesting were shouting, "We are not murderers," which to me was a very interesting and powerful moment, because they understood that they were being accused, or might be accused, of genocide. And these students, although they were students, had just come back, most of them, from reserve service in Gaza. So they were in civilian clothes, but they had just come back. And eventually, after about an hour of disruption, we decided to just let them in. And we let them all in, and we said, look, I'm not going to give a lecture, let's just talk. And we talked for about 2 hours. And for me, that conversation was quite revealing, quite interesting, quite important. And what I felt was that nobody had spoken with these students. Now, the university administration refused to take any responsibility for this event. The hosting professor complained to the university. He said, look, I mean, what about this guy couldn't hold a lecture? I invited him. And they said, well, we protect freedom of speech. So they were with bullhorns and kicking the doors and all of that. And he said, okay, we are just protecting freedom of speech, of the students, not mine, of course. But I felt that these students had not had an opportunity to speak about their experiences. And now this gets to me personally, because after I sat down with them, I told them, look, I was also in the army. In fact, I served 4 years in the army. I was a combat soldier. I was a company commander. I was wounded in service. That calmed them down a bit because I was less of a traitor, right? I was not somebody sitting in my air-conditioned room, as they say in Israel, and criticizing all these sweaty soldiers out in the field. So there was a sort of moment of recognition. I'm much older than them and all that, but I also had that experience. That has protected me much more than many, many of my colleagues in the United States as well. It has given me some protection. I'm also old. I'm about to retire. I'm a full professor. But the intimidation has to be acknowledged. There is massive intimidation of students, graduate students who are terrified, and I know some of them, not only by politics in Gaza, but all the visa policies now, and of faculty, both junior faculty, but also tenured people who still have their careers ahead of them. And we know now that you can fire tenured professors. A private university can fire a tenured professor. The professor can sue it if she can afford to, but they can fire people.
Dorian, what are your views on this? What counts as acceptable speech on a campus?
Well, I think there's a lot of tradition on that. It's things that aren't inciting violence or that aren't interfering with other people speaking. That's not a free speech principle. That provost or president, whoever, had not thought about things carefully if he said that.
Which one?
Yelling at a speaker is not permitted by, any normal version of academic freedom, so that the speaker can't speak. That provost was confused.
Is that a particular issue? I don't remember.
You mentioned
the one you mentioned in
Israel. You mean in my case?
That your free speech wasn't protected, but theirs was.
That administrator was confused. That was a bad excuse.
I don't think he was confused.
He just was intimidated.
He wasn't confused. In fact, that's an interesting thing, because this president and provost were among the protesters during the judicial coup, the judicial overhaul. So that's in Israel between January and October 2023. There were many demonstrations because the government was seen as threatening the rule of law in Israel, as weakening the Supreme Court and so forth. Yeah. And they were protesting against it. Once the war began, after October 7th, they became patriotic. Mm-hmm. And so what they are doing, in fact, was completely ideological. I had an exchange with them. With these two individuals on email, and they're just seeing me as being not patriotic, as complaining about a justifiable war against a nasty enemy. So they covered it up by saying freedom of speech, but that was obviously and overtly not actually what they were thinking about.
But in an academic context, on panels and lectures, I want to hear the most extreme versions from either side. That's what I want to see on campus. I thought this issue would come up. So
You're a right-wing communist.
I thought this issue would come up, so I did a little research on it. But first, I just wanted to acknowledge it's a terrible human tragedy that's going on. And God loves everyone. And when any human being is killed, it's a terrible tragedy. I've had a lot of people with a pro-Israel view telling me they've been censored, and people with a pro-Palestinian view telling me that they've been censored. So I went to the FIRE database on deplatforming, which is just, they try to collect every time that a speaker at a university has been prevented from speaking, to see what the data say on this. And so I found 526 deplatforming events since 2022. It's obvious why I chose that year. Of these, 203, or 39%, involved the Israel-Palestine conflict. So that means that this is really one of the most sort of hot issues right now, that people are getting deplatformed from it. Of those 203, 84, which is 41%, had a pro-Israel perspective, and 119, which is 59%, had a pro-Palestine perspective. Now, I don't know the base rate of invitations in terms of were there more pro-Palestine invitations or more pro-Israel invitations. But what it seems to me is that this is an issue where people are very excited and very angry about. There is representation of both sides on campus, and both sides are engaging in canceling.
If I could comment on this, I'm in a law school, right? One of the things that we do is international law. We've had no events as a faculty, for example, discussing the decisions of the International Court of Justice. You would think that it's significant that the International Court of Justice issued a series of preliminary orders against the state of Israel, to cease and desist from committing acts that plausibly threaten the Palestinians of Gaza with genocide. Now, it's not the case that we as law professors automatically genuflect to judicial opinions. It's quite common the case that, in fact, we are very critical of judicial decisions. But the fact that we haven't even had a discussion of it, I think, speaks volumes.
Why was that?
I don't know. I'm not and I can say confidently that this is the case also in other elite law schools. There's been complete silence on even recognizing this as a question to be discussed. I have a colleague at another
I wonder, Mohammed, I just want to pause you
Yeah.
there, because before you go on, you say there's been complete silence. Pablo raised something earlier about the self-censorship. Have there been moves from the faculty to say...
This is what I would say about that. So a colleague of mine at another top 10 law school in the United States confided in me that there is complete terror. Terror is the word he used to describe the feelings of his colleagues about talking about Palestine, that you will only mention it in private with people with whom you have complete trust, or on private email, right? You won't use your university email for anything, because there is fear. And this was even before Trump. This was during the last year of the Biden administration, right? And so I don't know of any issue, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, that in which faculty is terrified to speak to the extent that they have been since October 7th.
This idea of police of ideas, police of expressions, police of words, police for everything, it's a culture we are living that it's against knowledge. It's against pluralism. It's against diversity. It's against all the things we have been discussing today. When you can say a word, when you cannot say, cannot touch an issue of the importance of Palestine, Gaza, Israel, and that's what we are seeing also here in Latin America. Don't talk about that. Don't get yourself in trouble. You don't know what's going to happen. If this is happening here so far away from Middle East, and I can't imagine what made us as a society, as a civilization, to go to this, to go so far on that.
If you're a law professor and you see misuse of or covering up of what you know is are major crimes, major international crimes, and you don't speak out, then maybe you shouldn't be a law professor. Maybe you should be fired.
If I could just say, I think it's unfortunately not just timidity. A lot of people, I mean, people being people, some people have ambition, and they feel that by taking a public stance, that will undermine their ambitions.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Something in terms of this fear that you hear expressed, is there a fear that their cell phone's going to blow up? Or they're going to...
No, I don't
It's
think
not
so.
that sort of a fear.
It's not that sort of fear. I think it's the fear of the loss of opportunities, right? Honestly, I think it's the fear of loss of opportunities. I like to say I'm lucky because I have no ambition. And so because I have no ambition, I'm not deterred. You know, but not everybody is ambitionless.
But your main ambition as an academic is to keep your job, first of all. So if you're in threat of losing tenure...
So there is a couple issues there, though. Like, I mean, people have families. And if your family's going to... It's a big threat. If the threat is you're going to lose your house and your family's going to starve. And then the other thing is, if you only fire 1 in 10,000 faculty, the other 10,000, they see that and they get in line. And so...
But imagine, Dorian, if Newton or Darwin has said, no, I won't say that. It's going to give me some trouble.
But you know what Darwin's story, right? He didn't publish for 40 years because he was worried
because
it was going to give him some trouble.
We must wait.
And so, you know, and he actually, I mean, if you read The Origin of Species, he considers every argument and counter argument because he's been thinking about it for 40 years and talking.
No, because it's that is how knowledge advances. That is, and that was the mission of universities. To when silence gets in, I remember during dictatorship in Argentina, the lots of books banned and modern math were forbidden because they thought that it was a common thing, and so this idea that the most advanced universities, the one we from Latin America admire, the one we would have liked, we would have had the opportunity to study in, the one we visit as if they are, well, museums of knowledge, institutions, venerated institutions, where these things are happening is so painful, and it's incredible that to tell to teach what you learn is it requires a courage that well, from time to time in history this seems to happen.
I want to look towards the future now as we wrap up. I
more on
want to
that?
look to the future because we're rapidly running out of time and there's so much to talk about. I'm going to ask an existential question to your jobs, perhaps. Don't be afraid. But we live in a different economic and technological reality than previous generations. And I'm thinking about something we raised earlier, which is this proliferation of artificial intelligence and how that plays into how students learn now, the skills that are needed to be competitive. Do universities still have a place? Do you all still have a need for the types of jobs you bring to this table?
I think even more so. I think in an age where you can get the false sense of knowledge just by typing something into your iPhone or your Galaxy or whatever device you have, the risk of not training people in critical thought is even higher than it was in 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's crucial if we want to be a self-governing societies that citizens are taught skills of critical thinking.
A professor I had when I was studying in university said something that I think AI won't displace. He said the most important thing that happened in university it's not happening in the classroom. It happens in the corridors. It happens in the bar. It happens in the library. It happens, and that's a human experience. The access the information access will change dramatically. It's changing dramatically, but the human experience, that idea when you have something that is like a revelation that challenge your previous thoughts about something, that's a human experience. That's not. I can't imagine AI having that sort of feeling, and pluralism is a polyphony of voices that happens at universities, and so I think many things are going to change. Not that is going to go deeper and deeper, and it won't exclude AI, but it won't be caught by AI.
Dorian.
I agree with what you guys said. And as someone who uses AI in research and trains AI and develops aspects of it, to me, it feels like a really fancy linear regression, not something that's going to be conscious. And so I'm not super worried about that. However,
You have to break that down. What does that mean?
well, it just means it's a way to make predictions from input. You can talk about a linear regression with just, a one-dimensional linear regression is going to make you predictions, and it'll have some correlation with the output data. I'm not really that worried about them becoming conscious and replacing us. But let's consider the asymptotic case that robots and AI can do our whole economy so that humans can live 100 years on average and be richer than our wildest dreams and have all material things given for, taken care of for us. Well, what are we going to do all day? And so this comes back to the liberal arts. Well, that's just going to make universities even more important and studying philosophy and English even more important. If that,
I think that we are living in a period, I think now, that there is so much combination of conformism, of acceptance of things, of a kind of leveling down of everything, and of fear and resentment, that the university is itself threatened by that, and can be, if it's preserved, and I'm not sure that it will, because I think that the university may be taken over by corporations and by administrations and by something that will not be what the university used to be. But if it is preserved to be the place where we can look at our world from another space. This is the safe space. The real safe space is not that we don't challenge each other, but that we can challenge the kind of conformism of the world that we live in now. And we see that, I think, everywhere now. And it's not only in the West. I mean, you see that in China, too. You see it in Russia. It's to preserve a place where people can think separately from all that, can think from, if you like, from another universe, from another planet, and to keep prodding us, everyone else, to understand that that's not the whole truth, that that's not the only way to look at things. Whether that is possible anymore, I don't know, but I think for me, that's the reason to preserve the university as the sort of traditional institution that it once was.
Well, I want to thank you all for this conversation. Earlier, Omer, you said that one of the things that a university should do is allow people to talk about hard things, to listen, to explain. I think we did that today, and I'm very grateful to you all. So thank you for joining us. Thank you at home for joining us for this conversation on Doha Debates. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.